Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Washington, President Kennedy makes a decision on Cuba. In Vietnam, the U.S. uncovers a communist assassination plot. Thurgood Marshall speaks in Harlem. Marlon Brando meets the press in Australia. And a shocking upset in the NFL. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
There's no other box of facial tissues like this. Scotty's new Magic Oval box. Only Scotty's give you tissues that float up gently, one at a time, and come out in neat handfuls too, because there's a Magic Oval inside every new Scotty's box. Remember, for tissues that float up smoothly and come out in neatly folded handfuls, look for Scotty's pretty new Magic Oval box, the only one of its kind.
At his press conference Tuesday, President Kennedy announced the lifting of the U.S. quarantine of Cuba. The purpose of the quarantine, or blockade, which began the morning of October 24th, was to halt the Soviet military buildup in Cuba, including the construction of offensive nuclear missile and bomber bases.
I have today been informed by Chairman Khrushchev that all of the IL-28 bombers now in Cuba will be withdrawn in 30 days. He also agrees that these planes can be observed and counted as they leave. Inasmuch as this goes a long way towards reducing the danger which faced this hemisphere 4 weeks ago, I have this afternoon instructed the Secretary of Defense to lift our naval quarantine. The evidence to date indicates that all known offensive missile sites in Cuba have been dismantled. In addition, the Soviet government has stated that all nuclear weapons have been withdrawn from Cuba and no offensive weapons will be reintroduced.
Mr. Kennedy added, however, that much work toward a satisfactory resolution remains to be done.
The Cuban government has not yet permitted the United Nations to verify whether all offensive weapons have been removed, and no lasting safeguards have yet been established against the future introduction of offensive weapons back into Cuba. Consequently, if the Western Hemisphere is to continue to be protected against offensive weapons, this government has no choice but to pursue its own means of checking on military activities in Cuba. As for our part, if all offensive weapon systems are removed from Cuba and kept out of the hemisphere in the future, under adequate verification and safeguards, and if Cuba is not used for the export of aggressive communist purposes, there will be peace in the Caribbean.
The president finished his statement with a message of gratitude.
In this week of Thanksgiving, there is much for which we can be grateful. As we look back to where we stood only 4 weeks ago, the unity of this hemisphere, the support of our allies, and the calm determination of the American people, these qualities may be tested many more times in this decade, but we have increased reason to be confident that those qualities will continue to serve the cause of freedom with distinction in the years to come.
Later in the conference, President Kennedy responded to accusations of news suppression by his administration during the Cuban crisis.
It is true that when we learned the matter on Tuesday morning, until we made the announcement on the quarantine on Monday afternoon, that this matter was kept in the highest levels of government. We didn't make any public statement about it. And I returned to Washington that Saturday morning because I had a campaign trip that was going to take me till Sunday evening, and I had to come back, and we did not want to indicate to the Soviet Union or to Cuba or anyone else who might be our adversaries the extent of our information until we had determined what our policy would be. I have no apologies for that. I don't think that there's any doubt that it would have been a great mistake and possibly a disaster if this news had dribbled out when we were unsure of the extent of the Soviet buildup in Cuba, and when we were unsure of our response, and when we had not consulted with any of our allies who might themselves have been involved in great difficulties as a result of our action. Now, if the procedures which have been set out, which are really to protect the interest of security of the United States, are being used in a way inimical to the free flow of news, then we will change those procedures.
Finally, the president revealed his family's plans for Christmas.
The people of Florida are hoping that you and your family will again spend Christmas with them. Can you tell us what your present plans are, sir?
My father and mother are going to Florida in December, and my wife and children hope to go there for Christmas, and if my situation here permits, I will go in Christmas. If the question is the result of some stories that the tourist business in Florida is off because of our difficulties. I hope it will not be too dangerous in Florida this year.
U.S. forces in South Vietnam captured documents last week indicating stepped-up communist plans to assassinate American soldiers. One document outlined a plan to kidnap GIs riding in cyclos and then murder them. Cyclos are three-wheeled bicycle taxis, which in many parts of Vietnam serve as the only taxi service. The plan called for Viet Cong guerrillas to infiltrate the cyclo drivers who pick up American soldiers outside Saigon bars. The victim would then be taken to a Viet Cong hideout and killed. Other plans called for increased grenade attacks and the jabbing of Americans with poison needles. I'll have more news for you after this message.
There are times when you feel just right about everything. The kind of a day it is, the companionship you're enjoying, the very fact of being alive. And at times like these, it's so natural to enjoy a Kent, because you feel better about smoking with a taste of Kent.
You feel better about smoking with the taste of Kent. Kent with the micronite filter. Refines away a harsh flavor. Refines away a hot taste. It makes the taste of a cigarette mild.
And Kent has the right kind of mildness. Rich, pure tobacco taste from a blend of finest quality tobaccos, drawing free and easy through Kent's famous micronite filter. So naturally, Kent's the best for the flavor you like. Today, Kent, the cigarette that made the filter famous, is the favorite of millions all over America. You'll feel better about smoking with a taste of Kent.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
In Harlem yesterday, federal judge Thurgood Marshall spoke from the pulpit of St. Philip's Episcopal Church. He urged his audience to, quote, make Harlem the kind of place that people want to come to, unquote. The 54-year-old Negro judge opened his remarks by listing the many problems of Harlem, including poverty, segregated schools, and lack of job opportunities. He then added, quote, we can complain, we should complain, and we shall continue to complain. But we must feel the responsibility first ourselves. Let's make sure that our children will be ready for an integrated school. And before we complain about lack of job opportunities, we should see how many doors we've knocked on and whether it really is race or lack of education that spoiled our chances, unquote. Judge Marshall, who graduated first in his Howard University Law School class in 1933, successfully argued a number of critical civil rights cases before the Supreme Court as special counsel for the NAACP. In 1961, he was given a recess appointment by President Kennedy to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. In related news, President Kennedy signed an executive order Tuesday prohibiting racial and religious discrimination in housing built or purchased with federal aid. The order will apply principally to housing projects and apartments. The president's action fulfills a pledge he made during his presidential campaign of 1960. He announced the order at his press conference.
It is neither proper nor equitable that Americans should be denied the benefits of housing owned by the federal government or financed through the federal assistance on the basis of their race, color, creed, or national origin. Our national policy is equal opportunity for all, and the federal government will continue to take such legal and proper steps as it may to achieve the realization of this goal.
In Australia Wednesday, Marlon Brando gave a news conference at the Sydney airport before changing planes. The 38-year-old actor was on the way to the Japanese premiere of Mutiny on the Bounty, in which he stars. The film, shot mostly in Tahiti, had a nightmarish production for which Mr. Brando has been blamed. According to reports, he was commonly late to the set and demanded numerous script changes, forcing delays and extra shooting. The film, originally budgeted at $9 million, ended up costing $19 million. The film's director, Louis Milestone, said, quote, Marlon did not have approval of the story, but he did have approval of himself. If Brando did not like something, he would just stand in front of the camera and not act, unquote. Mr. Milestone did add, however, that many of Mr. Brando's suggestions proved correct. On Wednesday, Mr. Brando was asked if he considered himself a controversial actor.
Well, I guess I must be, if you say so.
He was asked if being controversial was something he'd set his mind to.
Well, if I were going to be a controversial personality, and that was my aim, and that I constructed all my behavior and arranged situations to conform to that objective, I would be awfully silly to admit it here. And if I'm not, then I think perhaps it's self-explanatory.
The actor was asked about his plans for the future.
Well, barring the atomic aspect of my life, I foresee myself as well, I don't know exactly.
Do you want to be a director or an actor or?
I don't know. I have a great interest in Tahiti and the life there. I'm buying a piece of property there, and I really haven't decided. There's still a lot of things floating around. I really haven't quite decided what I would like to do.
But do you intend to go on making films?
For the immediate future, yes.
Finally, Mr. Brando was asked to review a sampling of Australian beer.
Well, let's hear your comments. What do you think of Australian beer?
It's pretty fattening. No, it's awful good.
Sports, right after this.
For the young and the old, the sick and the troubled, give the United Way.
In a shocking Thanksgiving Day upset, the defending world champion Green Bay Packers were dominated by the Detroit Lions at Tiger Stadium. The 26-14 defeat was Green Bay's first loss in 13 contests dating back to last year. By the end of the game, Packers quarterback Bart Starr was bruised and battered, having been tackled for losses totaling 112 yards. Lions quarterback Milt Plum was outstanding, hurling 2 touchdown passes and kicking a field goal for good measure. In American Football League action yesterday, running back Abner Haynes tied the All-Pro season touchdown record in leading the Dallas Texans to a 35-7 victory over the Oakland Raiders. It was Oakland's 17th consecutive defeat, stretching back to last season. Haynes, a third-year pro, rushed from 33 and 19 yards for his 17th and 18th touchdowns of 1962. He now shares the All-Pro season record with 3 players: Jim Brown of the NFL's Cleveland Browns, Steve Van Buren of the Philadelphia Eagles, and Bill Groman of the AFL's Houston Oilers. Haynes will almost certainly break the record, as the Texans have 3 more games on the regular season schedule. After yesterday's game, Haynes was asked how he felt upon tying the record.
Well, I was quite elated of getting a touchdown. I'd been thinking about it all week. We had been teasing about it, and just got lucky and got a chance to get it, and we did.
When Haynes wasn't tearing through the defensive line, quarterback Len Dawson, the AFL's leading passer, was picking apart the Raiders' secondary. Rookie tight end Fred Arbanis was the recipient of 2 touchdown tosses from Dawson. Arbanis made sure to credit Dawson, as well as all-star receiver Chris Burford, for his success.
Well, a lot of the pressure is taken off of me because of Chris Burford. Everybody's watching him, so while they're watching him, I'm there, I'm open, and Lenny's hit me with some beautiful passes, and he's making us go.
Dallas did lose 2 players to injury, the aforementioned Burford and linebacker Smokey Stover. After the game, Arbanis gave an update on their condition.
Well, it looks like Smokey's got a pinched nerve in his neck. We hope that's all it is. And Chris, he just jammed his knee a little bit, but both will be all right. They're both tough, and we'll be ready.
And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Monday, November 26th, 1962. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.